If Hassan and Jonas Edmonds had hatched a murderous plot, their relatives in Aurora apparently knew nothing of it.
Both of them are introverts. They stick to themselves, they're funny.
But in court, neither cousin was laughing. 22-year-old Hassan, bald and wearing glasses, seated next to 29-year-old Jonas. Hassan earlier arrested at Midway Airport, allegedly headed to Egypt to join ISIS. But before leaving, the FBI says the Illinois National Guard member gave his uniform to Jonas so he could wear it to enter a nearby base. And with automatic weapons and grenades, kill as many soldiers as possible. The intended body count as high as 150.
Our guests know all the angles when it comes to terrorism and the effects here in America. First up, a former undercover counter-terrorism agent for the Canadian government. Also a former jihadist who wrote the fascinating book Undercover Jihadi. Let's welcome Mubin Shaikh back to MidPoint. And next, senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense during the first Bush administration, Jed Babbin. Gentlemen, I thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Jed, I'm going to begin with you as you look at this from a national security aspect as well. In your opinion, from what you have seen, taking into account this most recent event as well, are we doing enough here in America to find the killers before they can strike?
Well, we really aren't. And one of the things we are not doing, well, frankly, we're looking at this through the wrong end of the telescope. One of the things we have to address is the dedication of the Muslim populations in Western nations to not assimilate. I mean, one of the big problems we have is these people try to keep to themselves, try to maintain the culture that they were born in, and that's okay to some extent. But to the degree that they really isolate themselves, that's a very big problem. That makes them more susceptible to radicalization. And I think we need to look to the Muslim populations to try better to assimilate where they are. You see that in Britain, you see that in France and Canada, here. A lot of Muslim populations, really, as far as I know, none of them seek to assimilate into the Western nations, which become their homes.
Jed, if we don't get the Muslim populations to help in certain areas, though, what more can we be doing right now?
Well, and we can be doing things like the New York Police Department was doing before Mayor de Blasio stopped them, and frankly, do a lot more surveillance and reconnaissance around places where the Muslims congregate, whether it's mosques or schools, whatever. If you're going to find the people who are radicalized, you've got to look for the places where they're likely to be.
Does that include going back to an issue of profiling as well?
Well, it's not profiling. It's a matter of going where the likely problem is coming from. And, whether you look at the 1930s in Chicago and the mafia, or you look at, 2015 in Detroit and New Jersey and New York, I mean, there are places where people are going to be radicalized. You go where you're likely to get information. You're not going places where, like in, the blue-haired Minnesota grandma is not going to be the source of the problem. So you go where you find the problem.
Mubin, what Jed is saying right here, do you agree or disagree, knowing that you've got a tremendous amount of experience in dealing with these people?
Yeah, I'll agree on the separationist point. You have a lot of communities that do have a separationist worldview. This is a place where they're very prone to radicalization, to being brought back into the fold of extremists. Quite a large amount of Muslims do integrate, but I mean, like we agree, it's those that want to stay away from everyone, have a separationist worldview. Secondly, I don't think wide net surveillance works. NYPD's program didn't yield even a single arrest on terrorism. I think what you need is targeted surveillance. And again, I do echo the idea that you go where the threat emanates from. You're really not going to be looking at the blue-haired grandma from wherever.
As part of that, though, would you not agree that, about the minute or so that I have left here before we take a break, that word profiling, while some call it a dirty word, in many ways that still needs to be done in order to get to the potential terrorists?
Yeah, we do behavioral profiling, not ethnic profiling.
Yes.
Because if you're going to look for the brown guy with the beard, you're going to miss the white guy with no beard who's the convert. And if you announce to the world that we're looking for, the white guy with no beard, well, guess what? The white guy's going to grow a beard. So it's always we're always playing catch up, but it's behavioral profiling that we're going after.
I got about 20 seconds left before we take that break, though. Moving to you, what, in your opinion, needs to be done still?
Well,
I like what the FBI is doing. They're keeping an eye on people. These two are picked up really in a sting operation. The other, there was also an air mechanic, was also picked up, also in a sting operation. So I think more of those need to be done.
All right, gentlemen, if you would, please stand by just a couple of minutes here because we unfortunately have to leave America now and look at what else is going on around the world, certainly with regard to the terror, the other side of the issue, and the other side of the world, and the possible creation of a true terrorist state that could have wide-ranging implications not just for the Middle East, but for the world. Stay with us. We question everything here on MidPoint. Now let's get back to work. Former undercover counter-terrorism agent for the Canadian government, also a former jihadist who wrote the book Undercover Jihadi. Mubin Shaikh joins us here on MidPoint, and also senior fellow at the London Center for Policy Research and former Deputy Undersecretary of Defense during the first Bush administration, Jed Babbin. Mubin, I'm going to come to you right now when it comes to putting all of these little elements together overseas. We have so many different elements of terrorism. We have Boko Haram, there's Al-Qaeda, there's ISIS, there's the Houthis, so many of them. And now we have this huge vacuum that is now existing in Yemen. Could you see the global terrorist community ever trying to find a way to work together and perhaps find themselves a quote-unquote state, a launching pad where they can all gather, train, and all launch their attacks from?
You know, I don't think that they would have that kind of unity. The nature of such, some of these groups, especially ISIS in particular, which is the worst of the worst, they just seek to dominate the other groups. But the concern is still the same, whether Yemen or Iraq and Syria, they're actively trying to do that, especially in Iraq and Syria, what ISIS is doing. And ISIS will branch out not just to Yemen. They've already been doing that. Al-Qaeda has been there for some time, but also into North Africa, really to trample on the grounds of Al-Qaeda itself. Libya is a mess, and they're operating there. They're training there. In fact, the attack in Tunis was conducted by individuals who were trained in Libya. And Libya, as you know, is a boat ride away from Italy. So you will start to see these attacks in the coming year. I'm telling you now, you will see in this coming year attacks in Europe launched from North Africa in particular.
And whom do you think will be at the forefront of that? Would that be ISIS, as you call them?
It's going to be ISIS, absolutely.
What makes them the worst? And Jed, I want you to think about this as well, but when you say that ISIS is the worst of the worst, is it simply just their desire for brutality, or the fact that they've got a tremendous amount of money behind them that makes them the most powerful?
Well,
It's both.
really.
It's actually both.
Okay, hang on. Jed, hold on one second. Mubin, you said it's both?
It's both. It's definitely the brutality, killing even the other jihadi fighters, not even wanting to work with them, just absorb them and or kill them, and money. Of course, you need money to conduct and plan and conduct these big attacks, and that's exactly what they want to do. They want to make like they are a state, and they are going to attack like a state as much as they can.
Jed, would you agree that when we're looking at what's happening right now, we're looking at all these groups together, and as Mubin once said, he just said, rather, talking about ISIS, that we are going to face something this year in Europe, that there is something big on the horizon?
Well, look, there have been so many points that he's made that I have not been allowed to respond to. Let me first go back to the question of whether they're the worst.
Please do.
They're not. That's not. They are not the worst. They are not the worst insofar as taking American lives. Al-Qaeda still holds that record. Hezbollah is next. And you're never going to see all the terrorist community gather together because you've got a Sunni Shia split between them. I mean, you've got the terrorists who are sponsored by Iran. You've got the terrorists who are sponsored by the Arab nations. And they're never going to come together because they're at war with themselves. Now, whether you're going to have attacks in Europe or America or whatever, yeah, I mean, these things are going to happen. We know that these people are very adept at getting themselves together in social media and recruiting people, and they're going to be attacks. How big they are remains to be seen. I doubt there are going to be very big attacks because I don't think these people are capable of doing it. I don't think they have the networks. I don't think they have the resources. And regardless of their money, they're using a lot of that up. And they're robbing banks and taking ransoms, sure. But does that make them as significant a threat as Hezbollah or Al-Qaeda? That's laughable to think so.
All right, Mubin, I'm going to come back to you then on it because certainly there's a disagreement here about which one is worse. We both agree that they're all pretty bad here, but would you not say that Jed's got a point with regard to Al-Qaeda?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to measure it in the amount of Americans killed, that's definitely going to be Al-Qaeda, considering ISIS is really relatively new on the block. But give them time. Give them time. They will definitely be trying to outdo Al-Qaeda in that regard. And then I agree, of course. I mean, the Sunni and Shia who are fighting each other, not just in Iraq and Syria, but now in Yemen, risking, of course, a wider regional war, primarily with Iran and Saudi Arabia. Of course, they're not going to unite on the basis of that. I mean, with respect to networks that are present or not, I mean, what you have is, ready and willing participants. And this is really what it comes down to, I think. For ISIS, they really don't need to try hard to gather to gain recruits. You're seeing recruits all the way in Indonesia, Malaysia. In Indonesia, a chlorine attack in a mall was prevented by an ISIS returnee. So these guys they're very creative and they're very determined. And I think we'll see some things this year, maybe not in Europe, hopefully not in North America, but you can start to see the zombie attacks that are coming. It will then progress to more professional attacks.
We have professional attacks already, at least it certainly seems that way. Unfortunately, we are all out of time. We could talk for hours on this because, quite frankly, there's a lot of ground to cover, and we need to do it again. Jed Babbin, Mubin Shaikh, we thank you so much for joining us today, gentlemen. I look forward to the next time we speak.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, take care. Next up, the former American ambassador who has the answer for what troubles us in Iran. Just start dropping bombs and let's be done with it. We'll talk about that next.